Robert Miller placed both hands on the glass desk and closed his eyes for an instant that seemed like an eternity. The reflection of computer screens danced on his tense face, illuminating the lines of worry that had formed in just a few hours. Around him, the office on the 23rd floor of the corporate tower in Canary Wharf was plunged into an oppressive silence, broken only by the constant hum of the servers and the occasional sound of a red alert flashing on the screens. It was almost 10 at night in London, and what should have been the eve of his career's greatest triumph had turned into an unimaginable nightmare. Tomorrow at 9 in the morning, he was supposed to sign the merger with Data Corp, a £2 billion operation that would transform his company, Tech Vision Solutions, into the largest technology conglomerate in Europe. 15 years of work, sacrifices, sleepless nights, and impossible dreams were about to materialize in a single moment. But now, everything was crumbling before his eyes. Robert was 38 years old and had built his empire from scratch. He started in a rented flat in Bethnal Green with an old computer and a revolutionary idea about digital security systems. Today, Tech Vision had 1,200 employees, offices in 5 cities across the UK, and clients in 12 countries. He was the definition of success, the perfect example of the British entrepreneur who had beaten all the odds. Until tonight. The cyber attack had begun at 7 in the evening, like an almost imperceptible tremor. An alert here, another there. His security team didn't pay much attention at first, treating it as an amateurish hacking attempt that would be easily contained. But then the systems began to fail, one after another, like perfectly aligned dominoes. First the data servers, then the backup systems, then the internal communication networks. And finally, worst of all, the corporate bank accounts were frozen. Robert had summoned the entire technical team. 23 of the country's best systems engineers worked frantically for 3 hours, but nothing worked. Every attempt to contain the breach seemed to fuel the attack further. It was like fighting a digital hydra, where each severed head sprouted 2 new ones. Lines of code flickered on the screens in a chaotic and menacing dance. Michael Stevens, his chief technology officer, and a friend since the company's early days, had suggested calling the National Crime Agency. Robert refused. There was no time. If the news leaked, if the press discovered that Tech Vision was under attack on the eve of the biggest merger of the decade, all would be lost. Data Corp would cancel the deal in minutes. Investors would flee, stocks would plummet. 15 years destroyed in a single night. At 9:30, Robert made the toughest decision of his life. He sent everyone home, every engineer, every technician, every assistant. He didn't want anyone to witness the end. If Tech Vision was going down, he would go down alone, in command, until the very last second. Michael protested, saying they would stick together until the end, but Robert was adamant. He needed silence. He needed to think. He needed to accept that there might be no solution. Now, alone in his panoramic office overlooking the illuminated city of London, Robert watched the red numbers on the screens. The estimated loss already exceeded £300 million. Customer data compromised, intellectual property threatened, contracts at risk. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, knowing the impact was inevitable. He thought about calling Julia, his ex-wife. She had always known this day would come, had always warned that he was too obsessed, trusting systems too much and forgetting the human factor. The divorce had been amicable 2 years ago, but painful. She wanted children, a family, his presence. He could only think about expanding, growing, conquering. Now on the verge of losing everything, Robert wondered if she hadn't been right all along. A sound broke the silence. Robert raised his head sharply. The noise of wheels against the marble floor echoed down the empty hallway. Someone was there. Impossible. He had sent everyone home. Had Michael come back? Or worse? Was it a journalist who had somehow found out about the attack? The office door opened slowly. A woman entered, pushing a cleaning cart. She wore a simple navy blue uniform, her brown hair tied back in a practical ponytail, and she carried a cloth and a spray bottle in her hands. She stopped when she saw Robert standing in the middle of the room, looking at her with a mixture of surprise and irritation. Maria Evans was 32 years old and had been working on the building's cleaning crew for 6 months. She always arrived after hours when the offices were empty and quiet. She liked the tranquility, the predictable routine of wiping down desks, emptying bins, and leaving everything spotless for the next day. But tonight, something was different. "Mr. Miller, I'm sorry," she said softly, almost whispering. "I didn't know anyone was still here. I can come back later." Robert took a deep breath, trying to control his frustration. "No, it's fine. Carry on with your work. I'll just be a little longer." Maria nodded and began to arrange the chairs around the meeting table, but her eyes couldn't help but watch the screens flashing red, the endless alerts, the look of despair on the face of the man she usually only saw from a distance, always impeccable, always confident, always in control. Now he looked like a ship adrift in a storm. She finished cleaning the meeting table and approached the bin next to the CEO's desk. That's when she got a better look at the screens, the codes, the alerts, the systems failing one by one. Maria paused, the cleaning cloth still in her hand, her eyes fixed on the monitors. Robert noticed her gaze and sighed. "A cyber attack," he said, his voice bitter and weary. "My company is being destroyed as I watch, powerless to do anything. 15 years of work vanishing in a few hours." Maria didn't answer immediately. She kept looking at the screens, her expression shifting from curiosity to concentration, then to something Robert couldn't identify. She dropped the cleaning cloth onto her cart and stepped closer, almost without realizing what she was doing. "Mr. Miller," she said gently, "this isn't just a common attack. It's a coordinated, multi-layered assault. Look here," she pointed to one of the screens. "These codes are creating infinite loops in your defense systems. Every time your firewall tries to block it, it triggers another attack vector. It's a distraction strategy while the real intruder works behind the scenes." Robert turned slowly to face her, his eyes wide. "How do you know that?" Maria blinked, as if waking from a trance. She looked at Robert, then at her uniform, then at the cleaning cart. A blush rose to her cheeks. I studied digital security. I have a master's degree from Imperial College London in cryptography and defense systems. I worked for 3 years at a consulting firm before," she hesitated, "before things changed." Robert stared at her as if he were seeing a mirage. The woman who cleaned his office every night had a master's in digital security. It was impossible. It was absurd. It was. He glanced again at the flashing red screens, the only hope he had. "Can you help?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Can you stop this?" Maria looked at him, then at the screens, then at her own hands. "I can try," she said finally, "but I need full access to the systems, and I need time." Robert didn't hesitate. "How much time?" 6 hours, maybe less if I'm lucky, but I need absolute silence and no one can interfere with what I'm doing." "You have whatever you need," Robert said, stepping away from the desk and gesturing to his executive chair. "Everything, all access, all permissions, just—" He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "Please, save my company." Maria nodded and sat down in the leather chair. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, like a pianist before starting a symphony. Then she began to type. And Robert, for the first time in 15 years, was not in command. Maria didn't look up from the monitor for nearly 20 minutes. Her hands flew across the keyboard with a speed and precision that mesmerized Robert. He sat in one of the leather armchairs nearby, watching the woman who, just 5 minutes ago, had been an invisible part of the cleaning staff, transform into something entirely different. She was no longer Maria the cleaner. She was a digital warrior fighting a battle he didn't even know how to begin to understand. Her fingers danced between complex commands, opening windows, closing others, codes appearing and disappearing in sequences that made Robert's eyes burn just trying to keep up. She muttered to herself, occasionally technical terms he vaguely recognized from meetings with his IT team, but which now seemed part of a completely new language. "Found you," she whispered suddenly, her voice laced with satisfaction. "Here's the main entry point. Clever, very clever. They used a vulnerability in the automatic update system. No one thinks to check the updates because we trust them to be safe. But someone infiltrated a malicious code 3 weeks ago, waiting for the right moment to activate it. 3 weeks? Robert leaned forward. They've been inside our system for 3 weeks? Maria nodded without taking her eyes off the screen. And they've likely mapped everything in that time. Every file, every password, every weak point. This wasn't an improvised attack, Mr. Miller. This was planned months in advance. They knew exactly what they were looking for. Robert felt his blood run cold. Who would do this and why? Maria finally looked at him, her brown eyes serious. Someone who wants to stop your merger tomorrow. Someone who benefits from your company being out of the game. Or, she hesitated, someone from the inside. From the inside? Robert stood up abruptly. Impossible. I know my team. I've worked with some of them for over 10 years. Michael has been with me since day one. Maria turned her attention back to the screen. Perhaps. But the attackers knew exactly where and when to strike. That requires deep internal knowledge. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just telling you what the data shows. Robert ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of that possibility. The idea that someone he trusted could be behind this was more painful than the attack itself. He had built Tech Vision on loyalty, on trust, on a family culture. Could he have been so blind? I need to get to the server room, Maria said suddenly, standing up. The intruders created a back door that's running directly on the hardware. I can't close it from here. I need physical access to the servers. Robert nodded. It's in the basement. I'll go with you. They left the office and walked through the empty corridors of the building. The emergency lighting cast long shadows that danced on the walls as their footsteps echoed in the silence. Robert glanced at Maria. She was carrying a laptop he had grabbed from the meeting room and walked with a determination as if she had done this 1,000 times. Why are you working as a cleaner? He asked while they waited for the lift. With your knowledge, you could be earning 10 times more at any tech company. Maria pressed the button for the basement and was silent for a moment. Life doesn't always follow the script we plan, Mr. Miller. Sometimes we lose everything and have to rebuild from scratch. Sometimes pride and degrees don't pay the bills. Sometimes, she looked at him, we just need a chance to prove our worth again. Robert didn't ask any more questions. There was a pain in those words he recognized. The pain of someone who had been at the top and fallen. The pain of someone who knows what it's like to lose everything. That night, in that lift descending to the basement, Robert and Maria were more alike than either of them could have imagined. The server room was a controlled environment, cold and illuminated by blue fluorescent lights that gave the place an almost alien atmosphere. Rows upon rows of servers hummed constantly, each one processing millions of data points every second. It was the heart of Tech Vision, the place where everything happened, where all the secrets were kept. Maria walked directly to the central server, connected her laptop, and began to work. Robert watched the lights blinking on the equipment, each one representing processes he didn't fully understand. He was good at business, at strategy, at leading people, but here in this technological basement, he was just a spectator. This is going to take a while, Maria said without looking at him. I need to trace every line of malicious code and disable it manually. If I miss a single step, I could crash the entire system and then it really will be the end. I suggest you go get a coffee. This will take hours. Robert shook his head. I'm staying here. Maria looked at him with an expression that mixed surprise and something else, perhaps respect. As you wish. The next few hours were the longest of Robert's life. He sat on the cold floor of the server room, his back against a wall, watching Maria work. She was completely immersed, her fingers flying, her brow furrowed in absolute concentration. Every now and then she would mutter something, sometimes a quiet curse when she found something particularly tricky, other times a sigh of relief when she managed to disable another layer of the attack. It was almost midnight when Maria took a break. She stretched her arms above her head, her neck cracking as she turned it from side to side. Robert got up and walked to a small fridge in the corner of the room, grabbing 2 bottles of water. He offered one to her. Thanks, Maria said, accepting the bottle and drinking nearly half of it in one go. It's been a while since I've worked like this. I forgot how intense it is. Are you making progress? Robert asked, trying not to sound desperate. I am, she replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. I've disabled about 60% of the attack. The intruders are good, very good, but they left a trail. Small, almost invisible, but it's there. When I'm done cleaning everything up, I'll be able to trace them. Robert felt a spark of hope for the first time in hours. You can find out who did this? Maria smiled, a tired but confident smile. Mr. Miller, whoever did this is excellent, but I'm better. She went back to work and Robert resumed his position against the wall. He looked at the clock. midnight. In less than 9 hours, he was supposed to be in a boardroom signing a £2 billion merger. In less than 9 hours, his life could be either completely destroyed or saved. It all depended on the woman who, just a few hours ago, he saw as nothing more than part of the furniture. Robert thought of all the employees who had passed through his company over the years. How many talents had he overlooked? How many brilliant people were in positions that underestimated their abilities simply because he or any other leader never stopped to really look, to really ask? Maria had a master's degree and was cleaning toilets. How many other Marias were there in the world, invisible, underestimated, ignored? 1 in the morning. Maria had removed 80% of the malicious code. 2 in the morning, 90%, 3 in the morning. Robert was almost asleep when he heard Maria let out a cry of victory. Got it, she exclaimed, standing up so fast she nearly knocked over the chair. Robert, I got it! He jumped to his feet, his heart racing. Got what? Maria turned the laptop screen towards him. Look at this. I've removed all the malicious code. The systems are clean. More than that, she pointed to a series of numbers on the screen. I've traced the origin of the attack. I have an IP address, a physical location, and, she smiled, the name of the person who coordinated everything. Robert felt his legs go weak. Who? Maria hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Mr. Miller, before I show you this, you need to be prepared, because what I'm about to reveal will change everything. Robert swallowed hard. Show me. Maria typed a few commands and a new window opened on the screen. Data, access logs, communication records. And then, at the center of it all, a name that made Robert's world stop spinning. Michael Stevens, his chief technology officer, his friend of 15 years, his right-hand man from day one. The traitor had been inside the house all along. Robert stared at the name on the screen as if the letters might rearrange themselves and reveal someone else. Michael Stevens. Impossible. It had to be a mistake. Maria must have traced it wrong, mixed up the data, misinterpreted something. Michael was his friend, his brother, the man who had stood by his side when tech vision was nothing more than a crazy idea scribbled on a bar napkin. Are you sure? Robert asked, his voice hoarse. Absolutely sure? Maria nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting compassion. The logs don't lie, Mr. Miller. The access credentials are his. The typing pattern matches his. And what's more, she clicked on another tab, he's been in constant communication with an IP address registered to Novatech Solutions, your main competitor. Robert felt as if the floor had been pulled out from under him. Novatech was the only company that could rival TechVision in the UK market. If the merger with DataCorp went through, Novatech would be completely out of the game. But if TechVision fell tonight, if the systems collapsed, if the merger was cancelled, Novatech would automatically become the absolute industry leader. For how long? Robert managed to ask. How long has he been doing this? Maria scrolled through the screen, analyzing data. According to the records, about 4 months. It started subtly, small information leaks, then it escalated. Tonight's attack was the final move. 4 months. While Robert was planning the merger, negotiating terms, dreaming of the future, his best friend was sabotaging everything behind the scenes. Michael had been in every important meeting, had access to every confidential document, knew every detail of the operation, and he had used all of it to destroy Robert. Why? Robert whispered, more to himself than to Maria. We built everything together. I trusted him with my life. Maria slowly shut down the laptop, I can't answer that, Mr. Miller. I can only show you what the data reveals. The whys, she paused, only he can explain. Robert walked to the exit of the server room, pushing the door with more force than he intended. It slammed against the wall with a metallic clang that echoed down the empty corridor. He needed air. He needed space. He needed to process the betrayal that burned in his chest like fire. Maria followed him in silence, respecting his pain. She knew that kind of wound, the one that comes from someone you'd never expect. She herself had experienced betrayal years ago at the company where she worked, when a colleague stole her project and took all the credit, leaving her unemployed and without references. That's why she ended up taking any job she could find, including cleaning. Sometimes life breaks you in ways no one sees. They returned to Robert's office in silence. The sun was beginning to rise on the horizon, painting the London sky in shades of orange and pink. It was a new day, but Robert felt as if he were living through the end of everything. He went to the panoramic window and watched the city wake up below, the first cars on the streets, the lights in the buildings coming on one by one. "What do I do now?" he asked in a low voice. "How do I confront someone I considered family?" Maria placed the laptop on the desk and sat in one of the armchairs. "You have a few options. You can call him in here and confront him directly. You can go to the police with the evidence. Or," she tilted her head, "you can be smarter about it." Robert turned to face her. "What do you mean?" Maria crossed her legs, thoughtful. "Michael doesn't know you've found out yet. He thinks he's succeeded. That your company is destroyed and the merger will fall through, that gives you an advantage. You can use it." Robert sat down behind his desk, processing her words. "Go on." "Think about it." Maria leaned forward. "If you confront him now, he might have an escape plan. He might have deleted evidence. He might have accomplices who will be alerted. But if you act as if nothing happened, as if you still trust him, you can find out the full extent of the operation. How many other people are involved? What else he was planning to do?" Robert rubbed his face with his hands. "You're suggesting I pretend I don't know, that I look him in the eye and act normally?" "Exactly," Maria said. "But not just that. We're going to set a trap. We're going to make him expose himself completely, in a way he can't deny or escape." "And how do we do that?" Maria smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We create a fake system with fake information. Documents about a supposed new merger, even more valuable than the one with Data Corp. Data on a revolutionary technology that doesn't exist. We let Michael have access to it and wait for him to try to sell it to Novatech. When he does that, we'll have evidence not just of betrayal but of industrial espionage." Robert was silent for a long moment. It was risky. It was manipulative. It was exactly the kind of thing he'd always said he would never do. But Michael had crossed a line long ago. Michael had destroyed years of friendship, of trust, of loyalty. If Robert didn't act, other companies could be the next victims. "How much time do we need?" Robert finally asked. 3 days, Maria replied. "Maybe 4. Enough time for me to create the fake documents, set up the bait system and monitor. Here's every move." Robert looked out the window again. In 3 hours, Michael would arrive for the meeting preceding the merger signing. He would have to look into the eyes of the man who had betrayed him and pretend that nothing had changed. He would have to smile, shake his hand, maybe even thank him for his hard work. The thought made his stomach churn. "All right," he said finally. "We'll do it your way. But I want to know everything. Every move, every message, every file he accesses." Maria nodded. "You will." "But Mr. Miller," she hesitated. "You need to be prepared for what you might discover. Sometimes the whole truth is worse than we imagine." "It can't be worse than this," Robert muttered. Maria didn't reply. She knew it could. It always could. But she decided not to argue. Instead, she stood up and walked to the door. "I need a few hours to prepare everything. I also need to go home and change. I can't show up at the meeting dressed like this." She gestured to her cleaning uniform. Robert looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Maria had deep circles under her eyes. From a sleepless night, her hair was disheveled, her uniform creased, but her eyes shone with determination and intelligence. She had saved his company. She had uncovered the truth. and now she was helping him get justice. "Maria," he said before she left, "why are you doing this? You could have just cleaned up the attack and left. Why are you helping me like this?" Maria paused at the door, her hand on the frame. She was silent for a moment before answering. "Because I know what it's like to be betrayed by someone you trust. I know what it's like to have everything taken from you unfairly. And I know what it's like when no one believes in you, when no one gives you a chance. You gave me that chance tonight, Mr. Miller. Even when you were desperate, even with no reason to trust me, you did. Now I'm paying it back." Robert felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you, and please, you can call me Robert. I think after tonight we can skip the formalities." Maria smiled, a genuine smile this time. "All right, Robert, but only if you stop seeing me as the cleaner. Today I'm your ally." She left, and Robert was alone in his office as the sun rose completely over London. In a few hours, he would have to face Michael. He would have to play the role of a lifetime, feigning ignorance while inside his heart was shattered. But he would do it. For his company, for his employees, for all those who had trusted him. And he would do it because Maria had proven that sometimes help comes from the most unlikely places, from the people society teaches us to ignore. She wasn't just a cleaner, she was the person who had saved him when everyone else had failed. Robert picked up his phone and sent a message to Michael confirming the 9 o'clock meeting. The reply came almost immediately, full of an enthusiasm and falseness that Robert could now see clearly. The game had just begun. Robert was sitting at his desk when Michael walked into the office at 10 to 9 in the morning. His friend, or rather his traitor, was wearing an impeccable grey suit and carrying a brown leather briefcase that Robert had given him for his birthday 2 years ago. The smile on Michael's face was broad and genuine, or at least it appeared to be to anyone who didn't know the truth. "Good morning, boss," Michael said, his voice cheerful and carefree. "Big day today, huh? The merger that's going to change our lives. Did you get any sleep? You look exhausted." Robert forced a smile, every muscle in his face protesting the charade. "Hectic night. I was reviewing the final details until late. You know me, a perfectionist to the end." Michael laughed, that familiar laugh Robert had known for 15 years. "I know. How many times have I told you to relax, but that's why we are where we are. Your perfectionism got us here." Robert felt bile rise in his throat. Michael was standing there, looking him in the eye, lying with every word, every gesture, every smile. How could someone be so good at faking it? Or had it always been this way, and Robert had just been too blind to see? "Sit," Robert said, pointing to the chair in front of his desk. "I want to discuss a few things before the meeting with Data Corp." Michael sat down, crossing his legs comfortably. "Of course, is everything all right? You seem tense." "I'm fine," Robert lied. "It's just that, well, I had an idea during the night, something big, bigger than the Data Corp merger." The interest in Michael's eyes was almost palpable. "Bigger? What do you mean?" Robert leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "You know I've been keeping a few projects under absolute secrecy, right? Projects that not even you have had full access to." Michael nodded, a flicker of irritation briefly crossing his face. "I know. I always found that strange, to be honest. We're partners, aren't we?" "We are," Robert agreed, each word costing him a piece of his soul. "But this particular project is so revolutionary that I needed to maintain total discretion. But now, with the merger secured, I think it's time you knew. After all, I'm going to need your technical expertise to implement it." Michael's eyes lit up. "I'm listening." Robert took a folder from his desk drawer and placed it on the glass. Inside were documents that Maria and he had prepared over the last 3 hours. Information about a supposed artificial intelligence technology that could revolutionize security systems worldwide. Inflated numbers, impossible projections, but convincing enough for someone desperate for insider information. "This here," Robert said, tapping the folder, "is worth more than the entire merger with Data Corp. I'm talking about government contracts, military systems, international banks. Billions, Michael, not millions, billions." Michael reached for the folder, but Robert held it down. "Not yet. First, I need your word that this stays between us. Not even your wife can know. No one. If this leaks before the launch, we lose everything." "You have my word," Michael said without hesitation. "You know you can trust me, Robert. You always could." Robert wanted to laugh, or cry, maybe both. "I know," he said, releasing the folder. "That's why I'm sharing this with you first." Michael opened the folder and began to flip through the documents. His eyes scanned each page with a speed that betrayed his technical training. Robert watched every micro-expression on his face, the greed, the interest, the calculation behind his eyes. How had he never noticed it before? "This is incredible," Michael muttered, still reading. "If this is real, we'll change the game completely. When are you planning to launch?" 6 months, Robert lied, "but I need you to start preparing the infrastructure now. I'm going to give you access to the dedicated servers where the prototype is. You can start today." Michael closed the folder, his eyes fixed on Robert. "Today? But we have the merger to close." "The merger can wait a few hours," Robert said, pulling a flash drive from his drawer. "Here are the access codes and the basic files. I want you to dive into this today. The sooner we start, the better." Michael took the flash drive as if it were gold. "You got it. I'll start as soon as the meeting is over." "No," Robert said firmly. "I want you to... Start now. Go to the server room, get familiar with the system. I'll handle the merger meeting, you handle the future." Michael hesitated for only a second before nodding. "If you're sure." "I am," Robert said, standing up and extending his hand. "I trust you, Michael, I always have." Michael shook his hand, his grip firm and warm. "You won't regret it, boss. I promise." As Michael left the office, Robert sank into his chair, his hands trembling. Maria entered through the side door where she had been listening to everything. She was no longer in her cleaning uniform. She wore an elegant black pantsuit, her hair loose over her shoulders, with light but professional makeup. She looked like a top-level executive, which she always should have been. "He took the bait," Maria said, holding a tablet. "I'm already tracking the flash drive. As soon as he plugs it into any device, I'll know, and he will. He'll probably copy everything and send it to Novatech before the end of the day." Robert nodded, still processing the performance he had just given. "He was right about me trusting him. I just never imagined he'd use it against me." Maria sat in the chair Michael had occupied moments before. "People betray for different reasons, Robert. Sometimes it's greed, sometimes it's envy, sometimes it's just because they can." "And in his case?" Robert asked. "What do you think it is?" Maria looked out the window, thoughtful. "I think it's resentment. You're the face of the company. You get the awards, the interviews, the recognition. He works in the shadows, doing the technical work, but no one remembers his name. I bet Novatech offered him more than money, they offered him the spotlight." Robert had never thought of it that way. Had he really overshadowed Michael? Had he been so focused on himself that he didn't notice the resentment growing beside him for years? The merger meeting went off without a hitch. The DataCorp executives noticed nothing wrong. Robert played his part perfectly, smiling for the cameras, shaking hands, signing documents. But his mind was in the basement, where Michael was right now, plugging in the fake flash drive. Maria was in an adjacent room, monitoring every move. She had created a system so convincing that even she would have been impressed if she didn't know it was fake. It had fake logs, fake data, even fake communications with supposed international clients. It was a perfect web waiting for the spider. At 3 in the afternoon, Maria's tablet buzzed. She looked at the screen and smiled. "He's copied everything, and now he's sending it to an IP address I've traced directly to a Novatech server." Robert was beside her, watching the data flow. "Is that enough to prove industrial espionage?" "It's enough to destroy his career and put Novatech in serious legal trouble," Maria confirmed. "But there's more." She typed a few commands and a new window opened. "He's not working alone, Robert. There are other people in here passing information. Look at these logs." Robert looked at the screen and saw names. 3 other Tech Vision employees were involved, people he trusted, who had worked with him for years. The betrayal wasn't just Michael's, it was systemic. How many more? Robert whispered, feeling his world crumble again. I don't know yet, Maria said gently. But we'll find out. Do you want to do this now, or wait? Robert glanced at the clock. 5 in the afternoon. Michael was probably still in the building. Now, he said firmly. Let's end this once and for all. They went down to the server room together. Maria had tracked Michael's location through the security cameras. He was exactly where they expected, connected to the dedicated server, downloading more fake files. When they opened the door, Michael turned around, guilt written all over his face. For a moment, just a brief moment, the mask fell, and Robert saw the raw, naked truth, fear, anger, and something else. Relief, as if Michael was tired of pretending. Hello, Michael, Robert said calmly. I think we need to talk. The silence in the server room was deafening. Only the constant hum of the equipment filled the void between the three of them. Michael stood before the computer, the flash drive still connected, the evidence of his betrayal glowing on the screen behind him. He didn't try to deny it. He didn't feign surprise. He just looked at Robert with an expression that mixed defiance and exhaustion. How long have you known? Michael asked, his voice surprisingly calm. Since last night, Robert replied, when Maria figured it all out. Michael looked at Maria, who stood beside Robert, and let out a bitter laugh. The cleaner. Of course, I should have known you. Had someone hidden up your sleeve? You were always good at keeping secrets, weren't you, Robert? Robert took a step forward, feeling anger pulse through his veins. I kept secrets. You spent months selling my company to the competition. You tried to destroy me on the eve of the biggest merger of my life. And you have the nerve to accuse me of keeping secrets. Michael unplugged the flash drive and threw it on the table with force, the metallic sound echoing through the room. You want the truth, Robert? The raw truth? I was tired. Tired of being your puppet. Tired of doing all the technical work while you smiled for the cameras. Tired of hearing how Robert Miller is a genius, a visionary, when I was the one building everything. You were building? Robert felt the anger rise, heating his face. We were building it together. This company was a partnership from day one. Partnership. Michael spat the word as if it were poison, getting up from his chair with such force that it nearly toppled over. What partnership, Robert? You were always the boss. You always had the final say. You always got the spotlight while I worked in the shadows. Do you know how many times someone at a conference asked me if I was your assistant? Your assistant. I have 2 doctorates, I've published papers in international journals, I've created systems that are used on 6 continents. But to everyone, I was just Robert Miller's IT guy. Robert felt as if he'd been punched. Those words carried years of accumulated resentment, wounds he never knew existed. Had he been that blind? So consumed by his own journey that he failed to notice the pain beside him. Maria watched the confrontation in silence, but Robert saw something in her eyes. Understanding. Not agreement, but understanding. She knew what it was like to be invisible. She had lived it. And maybe that was why she could remain calm, while Robert felt his world collapse for the second time in days. So that's why? Robert asked, his voice breaking despite his efforts to keep it steady. For ego? For recognition? You betrayed 15 years of friendship, risked the livelihoods of 1,200 people who depend on this company? All because of your ego? It wasn't just ego, Michael replied, leaning against the desk, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of it all had finally hit him. Novatech offered me something you never did. They saw me. They valued me. They promised I would be the CTO with real decision-making power, not just a glorified employee. They offered me 40% of the company. 40%, Robert. What do I have here? 5%? And even then, you never consulted me on the really important decisions. Robert closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process. 5% of a company worth billions wasn't a small amount, but it wasn't about the money, it never was. It was about feeling part of something, about having a voice, about mattering. And Robert, in his obsession to grow, to conquer, had failed to make Michael feel that. That doesn't justify betrayal, Maria said finally, her voice firm but not without compassion. You had choices. You could have left. You could have negotiated. You could have been honest about how you felt, but you chose the path of dishonesty and put hundreds of jobs at risk. Entire families depend on this company, Michael. Did you think about them when you decided to nearly destroy everything? Michael looked at her with a mixture of anger and something that looked like shame. And you? The cleaner who suddenly turns out to be a security expert. How many secrets are you keeping? What do you get out of all this? Are you hoping Robert will marry you now that you've saved his company? Maria didn't blink, didn't back down. Her voice came out even firmer. I'm not getting anything other than doing what's right. Unlike you, I don't need to destroy others to feel valued. And if you think I did this expecting a reward, then you've understood nothing about integrity. The silence that followed was heavy. Robert looked at Maria with renewed respect. She had faced Michael's attack with a dignity he himself was struggling to maintain. Michael turned back to Robert, his expression shifting to something more calculating. Are you going to turn me over to the police? Make a public scandal? Because if you do, you should know I have information on you too. Things that may not be illegal, but would definitely tarnish your image as the perfect CEO. Those shortcuts we took in the early years when we were desperate for growth, remember? Robert felt his stomach sink. Of course he remembered. In the early years of Tech Vision, when they were struggling to survive, he had made decisions that now, in the light of success, seemed questionable. Nothing criminal, but certainly things the media would love to twist. What information? Robert asked, keeping his voice neutral despite the growing fear. Michael smiled, a humorless, almost sad smile. The minor tax infractions from the early years when we underdeclared revenue to pay fewer taxes. The questionable contracts with that offshore company. The dubious decisions about data privacy at the beginning, before the regulations got strict. Nothing that would put you in jail, but enough to cause trouble. A lot of trouble. Enough to make Data Corp reconsider the merger. Robert looked at Maria, who shook her head slightly. She had already thought of this. She had anticipated that Michael would have some kind of insurance. But from her look, Robert understood they had something better. They had the truth, and they had irrefutable evidence of what Michael had done. You're bluffing, Robert said with more confidence than he felt, crossing his arms. And even if you weren't, I'd rather face any investigation than let you get away with this. Because, I'll tell you something, Michael, those decisions we made in the beginning, we made them together. You were there in every meeting for every tough choice. If I go down, you go down with me. The difference is, my actions were those of a desperate entrepreneur trying to survive. Yours were those of a traitor trying to destroy. Michael blinked, and for the first time, Robert saw real fear in his eyes. He hadn't thought of that his threats would incriminate him as well. Michael laughed, but it was a joyless, almost hysterical laugh. Get away with it. You think Novatech is going to protect me now? They'll throw me to the wolves the second they find out I've been exposed. I've already lost everything, Robert. My reputation, my career, probably my family when my wife finds out what I did. You've already won. You don't need to destroy me completely. For the first time since it all began, Robert saw Michael not as a calculating traitor, but as a desperate man who had made terrible choices. A part of him, a small but still existing part, felt pity. He remembered the Michael from 15 years ago, the brilliant, young engineer who believed that together they could change the world. Where had that man gotten lost? I don't want to destroy you, Michael, Robert said finally, his voice softer but no less firm. But I can't let this go either. You betrayed not just me, but everyone in this company. Every person who woke up every day and trusted that we were building something solid. And apparently you weren't alone. Who else is involved? Michael was silent, staring at the floor. Robert could see the internal struggle, the final decision about how far his loyalty to his accomplices would go. Maria stepped forward, holding the tablet and turning the screen so Michael could see. You don't have to answer. We already know. 3 other employees, all in the IT department, Lucas Fisher, Patricia Cole, and Roger Allen, all have been passing information to Novatech for months. The records are here. Every file transferred, every encrypted email, every payment received. Michael's face went pale. How did you get that? Maria put the tablet away. Because you underestimated the power of a thorough investigation. And because when you created the back door in the system, you left a trail. Small, almost imperceptible, but it was there, for someone who knows what to look for. They didn't know everything, Michael said quickly, almost desperately. I convinced them we were just doing external consulting, that it was legal. They didn't know about last night's attack. They didn't know it was planned to destroy the company. They thought it was just selling market intelligence, nothing that could really hurt Tech Vision. But they knew they were stealing confidential information, Maria retorted, her voice sharp. They knew they were breaking non-disclosure agreements. They knew they were betraying the trust of Robert and every other employee. That makes them accomplices, Michael. Maybe not in the main attack, but in corporate espionage. And that is a crime. Robert ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of this new revelation. 3 more people, 3 families that would be destroyed. But he couldn't let it go. He couldn't send the message that betrayal was acceptable if you weren't the one leading it. How did we get to this point, Michael? Robert asked, his voice filled with genuine pain. When did you decide our friendship was worthless? When did you decide that 15 years together could be thrown away just like that? Michael finally looked at him, and Robert saw tears welling in the corners of his eyes. When I realized that to you, I was just another employee. When my daughter asked me why her name wasn't on the guest list for the company's anniversary party, when all the other executives went with their families. She was 7, Robert, 7 years old, and she asked me why Daddy wasn't important enough. When you announced the merger to the media before telling me, and I found out on television like everyone else, when I realized I had given 15 years of my life to build someone else's dream, and that person didn't even see me as an essential part of it. Robert felt like he'd been punched in the gut. The party. He vaguely remembered it. It had been organized by the HR department. He hadn't reviewed the guest list, just assumed it was fine, and the merger announcement had been a last-minute decision by the marketing department to catch the competition by surprise. He hadn't even thought to tell Michael first, because he assumed that he as the CTO would be present for all the important moments. But he hadn't been, and Robert had never noticed. Had he really been such a bad boss? So blind to the needs of the people around him? Maria had saved his company, but maybe she was also saving him from himself, showing him that he didn't see people, didn't value who really mattered. He was so focused on the final destination that he forgot to take care of those making the journey with him. I'm sorry, Robert said, and he realized he meant it. The words came out laden with genuine emotion. I'm sorry if I made you feel invisible, if I made you feel undervalued. That was not my intention, but I recognize that I failed as a leader and as a friend. I should have seen it. I should have asked. I should have made you feel that you were an essential part of all this, because you were. But that doesn't justify what you did, Michael. Nothing justifies betrayal of this magnitude. You could have come to me. You could have given me an ultimatum. You could have left if you really couldn't take it anymore. But you chose to destroy me. Michael quickly wiped his eyes as if ashamed of his own tears. I know, and you're right to punish me for it. I just ask one thing. Leave the other 3 alone. They have families, young children. Lucas just had a baby. Patricia supports her sick mother. Roger has 2 kids in university. They were just fools who believed in me, who trusted me when I said it was legal. The real culprit is me. I manipulated them. Maria looked at Robert, awaiting his decision. It was his. It had always been his. She had given him the tools, the evidence, but the final justice was his, to decide. Robert took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every life that would be affected by his decision. I'll do this. I will turn over the evidence against you to the authorities. You will cooperate fully and reveal everything about Novatech's involvement. In return, I will speak with the other 3 employees. If they confess voluntarily, if they can prove they were manipulated and didn't have full knowledge of what was happening, I will not press charges. I will only fire them. They'll lose their jobs but not their freedom. But you, Michael, you will face the full consequences because you knew exactly what you were doing. Michael nodded slowly, defeat etched on every line of his face. Fair. It's more than I deserve, all things considered. Robert turned to leave but stopped at the door. One last thing, Michael. We were friends once. That meant something to me. I'm going to miss you. Not the person you became, but the person you were. Who we were together when we still believed in the same dream. Michael didn't answer. He just stood there in the middle of the server room, surrounded by the equipment he had helped install. Years ago, when he still believed in the dream he shared with Robert, when there was still hope, friendship, and true loyalty, Maria and Robert left together. As the door closed behind them, Robert finally allowed the emotions to hit him. He didn't cry, but his legs felt weak. Maria held his arm, firm and present, her strength keeping him upright. "You did the right thing," she said gently, her voice soft but firm. "And you learned something important today." "What's that?" Robert asked, his voice hoarse with contained emotion. "That being a great leader isn't just about vision and strategy. It's about seeing people, all people, even the ones who clean your office after you've gone home. It's about making every person feel that they matter, that they're seen, that they're valued. Because in the end, companies aren't built by machines or systems. They're built by people, and people need to be seen." Robert looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, he truly saw. He saw a brilliant woman whom life had knocked down but not destroyed. He saw someone who chose to help when she could have simply turned her back. He saw an extraordinary person whom everyone around, including himself, had overlooked. And he saw the person who was changing not only his company, but him. And in the midst of the worst crisis of his life, surrounded by betrayal and pain, Robert realized that he might have found something he didn't even know he was looking for. Not just an ally, but someone who truly understood him, someone who challenged him to be better, someone who, without him realizing it, had become essential. 3 months had passed since that fateful night. London continued its frantic dance outside, but inside Tech Vision Solutions, everything had changed. Robert stood at his office window, watching the traffic on the streets of Canary Wharf, thinking about how life can turn upside down in a matter of hours. The story had leaked to the press, of course. There was no way to keep something of that magnitude a secret. The newspapers ran sensational headlines about corporate espionage, betrayal, and drama in the tech world. Robert had expected the scandal to destroy TechVision, for investors to flee, for clients to cancel contracts. But the opposite happened. His decision to be completely transparent, to admit the security failure, but also show how quickly it was resolved, generated a wave of respect. Business leaders praised his honesty. The media highlighted how he handled the crisis. And when Maria's story emerged of how a cleaning staff member had saved £1 billion empire, it went viral. Newspapers, magazines, television shows, everyone wanted to interview Maria Evans, the woman with a master's degree who was cleaning offices and became the new head of cybersecurity for one of the UK's largest tech companies. She became a symbol of resilience, of how talent is hidden in unlikely places, of how social prejudices make us overlook extraordinary people. Maria gave interviews to the country's leading media outlets. On the most watched show on British television, when the host asked how she felt being called an inspiration, Maria answered with a humility that touched millions of hearts. "I don't see myself as an inspiration," she said, her eyes shining under the studio lights. "I see myself as proof that the system fails many talented people. How many other Marias are out there, cleaning offices, driving taxis, working jobs that underutilize their skills? Not because they aren't capable, but because life sometimes knocks us down, and society doesn't easily offer second chances." That interview sparked a movement. Companies began to review their hiring processes. Professional reintegration programs were created. Maria received hundreds of messages from people in similar situations, thanking her for giving a voice to a reality that many lived in silence. The merger with Datacorp was successfully completed, despite all the drama. In fact, the CEO of Datacorp said he was even more impressed with TechVision after seeing how Robert handled the crisis. The company's stock soared. New contracts poured in. TechVision was now officially the largest technology conglomerate in Europe. As for Michael, he had cooperated fully with the authorities. He revealed Novatech's entire operation, which now faced massive lawsuits for industrial espionage. Michael would stand trial, but his cooperation would likely reduce his sentence. His wife left him, taking their daughter. He lost everything just as he had predicted. The other 3 employees involved confessed, were fired but not prosecuted, as Robert had promised. Robert visited Michael in prison once, 2 months after everything happened. It was a difficult conversation, laden with unresolved emotions. Michael had lost weight, his face marked by the weight of his guilt and the consequences of his choices. He apologized, not just formally, but with genuine tears of remorse. Robert in turn also apologized for not being the leader Michael deserved, for not seeing the signs of dissatisfaction, for failing to create an environment where everyone felt truly valued. They didn't become friends again, but they found a form of peace, a necessary closure for both to move on. Robert learned a great deal in those 3 months. He implemented profound changes in the company. He created recognition programs for employees at all levels, where people from different departments were celebrated monthly not just for results, but for actions that reflected the company's values. He began holding monthly town halls where anyone from interns to executives could share ideas directly with him. He instituted a program called Invisible Talents, dedicated to identifying employees in positions below their potential and offering them opportunities for development and promotion. He realized he had built an empire, but had failed to build a true corporate family. TechVision wasn't just about profits and growth. It was about the 1,200 people who woke up every day and dedicated their lives to that project, each with their own dreams, talents, and stories, and they all deserved to be seen. Maria completely transformed the cybersecurity department. She hired new talent, many from unconventional backgrounds like her own. She implemented revolutionary systems that became an industry benchmark, making TechVision virtually impenetrable. But more than that, she brought a new perspective to the company. She saw things others didn't. She understood people in a way Robert was only beginning to learn. In executive meetings, she was often the voice that reminded everyone that behind every strategic decision were real people who would be affected. And over the past 3 months, something else had blossomed between them. It began with work meetings that stretched longer than necessary, conversations about technology that drifted into personal stories, shared coffees in the early hours when they both worked late, glances that lasted a second longer than they should, lunches that turned into long conversations about dreams, fears, and hopes. Robert hadn't planned on falling in love. After his divorce from Julia, he had decided that relationships weren't for him, that his company was all he needed. But Maria was different. She understood his world because she lived in it. She challenged his ideas, not to confront, but to improve them. She made him laugh in the most stressful moments, and most importantly, she saw him, truly saw him, not the billionaire CEO, but Robert, the man who was afraid of failing, who sometimes doubted himself, who carried the weight of 1,200 families on his shoulders. Maria hadn't expected to fall in love either. She had built walls around her heart after being professionally betrayed years ago, when she lost not only her job, but also her trust in people. But Robert was different from what she imagined billionaires to be. He was vulnerable, genuinely interested in learning, willing to admit his mistakes. And after that night she saved his company. He never treated her as a subordinate, but as an equal, as a partner. Today was a special day. Robert had just inaugurated a new research and development center for TechVision, a 5-story building dedicated exclusively to innovation. It was the project he had dreamed of building since he founded the company, and it held a secret that no one, not even Maria, knew. "She'll be here any minute," said Caroline, Robert's assistant, appearing at the door. "Everything is ready as you asked." Robert nodded, nervously adjusting his tie. "Thanks, Caroline. You can go. I'll take it from here." Caroline smiled, a smile that said she knew exactly what was about to happen. "Good luck, boss. You're going to need it." When she left, Robert checked his jacket pocket for the 10th time. The small blue velvet box was still there. He took it out, opening it to see the ring for the 1,000th time. A diamond solitaire, elegant and understated, exactly the kind of thing he thought Maria would appreciate. It wasn't about ostentation. It was about meaning. He had chosen it himself, spending weeks visiting jewelers, looking for something that captured her essence. Simple yet extraordinary. Discreet yet impossible to ignore. Maria arrived 15 minutes later. She wore a light grey suit, her hair in a loose bun, discreetly framed glasses on her nose. She was beautiful in a way Robert was still learning to name. It wasn't the beauty that graces magazine covers. It was the beauty of someone intelligent, confident, who had earned every inch of her place in the world. "Robert, you wanted to see me," she said, entering the office. "Is everything all right? You seem nervous." "I'm great," he lied, standing up. "I want to show you something. Come with me." They left the office and took Robert's car. Maria asked where they were going, but he just smiled and said it was a surprise. 20 minutes later, they parked in front of the new research center. The building was modern, all glass and steel with vertical gardens on its sides. "Is this the new center?" Maria asked, admiring it. "It's beautiful. You must be proud." "I am," Robert replied, getting out of the car. "But there's something I want to show you before the official opening tomorrow." They entered the empty building. Robert had sent all the employees and security staff home for a few hours. He wanted privacy for what he was about to do. They walked through the gleaming corridors, Maria commenting on the architecture, how well planned the labs were, the possibilities the space offered. Robert led her to the top floor to the main auditorium. It was a large space with huge windows offering a panoramic view of London. In the center of the stage, illuminated by a single spotlight, was a bronze plaque. "What's that?" Maria asked, walking towards the stage. "Go see," Robert said softly. Maria stepped onto the stage and read the plaque. Her eyes widened, her mouth fell open. She read it again as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The Maria Evans Innovation Center. It was dedicated to her. The entire building bore her name. "Robert," she whispered, turning to him with tears in her eyes. "What have you done?" Robert walked onto the stage, standing beside her. "I dedicated this center to you because you didn't just save my company that night, Maria. You saved me. You showed me that I was so focused on building an empire that I forgot to build real, human connections. You showed me that judging people by their appearance or social standing is the biggest mistake we can make. You showed me," he paused, taking her hands, "that extraordinary people are where no one is looking." Maria was crying now, tears streaming freely down her face. "I just did what was right. Anyone would have done it." "No," Robert shook his head. "Anyone would not have. You had every reason to ignore me that night, to pretend you knew nothing and walk away. But you chose to help. You chose to use your talent to save a desperate stranger. And afterwards you chose to stay. You chose to help me grow, to be a better leader, a better person." "Robert," she began, but he gently interrupted her. "Let me finish. Over the last 3 months, you've transformed not just TechVision's security, but the entire culture of the company. You brought humanity to a place that was becoming cold and corporate, and you've transformed my life in a way I can't even fully explain. You made me realize that success without genuine connections is empty, that leadership without empathy is tyranny, that," he took the small box from his pocket, "a life without you by my side would be incomplete." Maria put a hand over her mouth, her eyes wide as Robert knelt down. "Maria Evans," he opened the box, revealing the ring. "Will you accept not only to continue working with me, but to build a life by my side? To be my partner not just in business but in everything? I love you. I love your intelligence, your strength, your ability to see beauty and potential where others only see the surface. Will you marry me?" Maria was silent for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then she knelt down too, meeting Robert at his level. She took his face in her hands. "I had already made that choice that first night," she said, smiling through her tears. "When I saw a desperate man who needed help, and I decided to be that help. When I chose to trust again after being betrayed before. When I decided that maybe the universe had put me in that place, at that moment, for a reason. Yes, Robert Miller, I accept being your partner in everything." Robert slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss that carried 3 months of unresolved tension, of unsaid feelings, of a connection they both had tried to deny, but which had always been there. When they parted, they were both laughing and crying at the same time. "You know the press is going to have a field day with this," Maria said, still in his arms, "the billionaire CEO and the former cleaner." "Let them talk," Robert replied. "Our story is about so much more than that. It's about recognizing value where others don't see it. It's about giving chances. It's about not letting prejudice dictate our lives." Maria rested her forehead against his. "It's about finding love in the most unlikely of places." They stood there, on the stage of the Maria Evans Innovation Centre, holding each other as the sun set over London, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Two survivors who had lost everything at different times in their lives and who had found in each other not just salvation, but redemption. The story of Robert and Maria teaches that we should never judge a person's worth by their position, appearance, or current situation. That true greatness is often hidden in unlikely places. That pride and prejudice can make us miss the most extraordinary people. That genuine trust and loyalty are rarer and more valuable than any material success. And that sometimes, when we lose everything, is when we find what truly matters. 6 months later, Robert and Maria married in a ceremony that perfectly reflected who they were. It wasn't in the most luxurious hall in London, but in a botanical garden, surrounded by nature and the people who truly mattered. The employees of TechVision were there, from executives to the cleaning crew Maria had once been a part of. Julia, Robert's ex-wife, was also there, happy to see the man she once loved finally find a balance between ambition and personal life. During the ceremony, Robert made vows that left many guests in tears. "Maria, you taught me that being great isn't about how much you accumulate, but about how much you lift others up. I promise to spend the rest of my life seeing people, all people, through the eyes you taught me to have." Maria, in turn, promised to always remind him that vulnerability is not weakness, and that asking for help is one of the greatest acts of courage. Michael was serving a reduced sentence for his cooperation with the authorities, but he sent a letter apologizing and wishing them happiness. Robert read it aloud during the wedding dinner, explaining to the guests that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but freeing oneself from the prison of resentment. Not because what Michael did was right, but because he understood that holding on to resentment was a prison he was choosing for himself. The room fell silent, many reflecting on their own unresolved hurts. TechVision continued to grow, but now with a completely transformed culture. Employees at all levels felt seen and valued. The company became known not only for its technology, but for being a place where everyone had a voice, where talent was recognized regardless of title or background. The Invisible Talents program had already promoted 23 people to positions where they could fully use their abilities, and other companies began to replicate the model. And Maria, the woman who once pushed a cleaning cart through empty corridors, now sat on administrative boards, gave international lectures on cybersecurity, and was recognized as one of the most brilliant executives in the industry. But more important than all, that she had found not just professional success, but a family, a home, a place where she finally belonged. As for Robert, he learned the most important lesson of his life. That being a true leader isn't about being at the top alone, but about lifting others up with you. That recognizing talent isn't enough. You must create opportunities for it to shine. And that the greatest success is not measured in billions of pounds, but in transformed lives, in genuine connections, in shared love. And every time Robert passed the entrance to the Maria Evans Innovation Centre, he would stop for a moment to read the plaque, and he would smile, because he knew that name represented much more than a building. It represented a second chance for both of them, proof that it's never too late to change, to grow, to see the world with new eyes, and that sometimes the person who will save your life won't arrive in an expensive suit or with impressive credentials. They'll arrive pushing a cleaning cart, with humility in their heart, and a hidden talent just waiting for an opportunity to shine.